What's up, folks? Sorry to even keep you waiting for a minute. You're watching Triple B TV. So it feels like we haven't done one of these things for like a month. I just did one last week. I know I'm not even on location. These lights might go at any minute. Leave a comment down below. Leave a comment. Drop a comment down below and take a wild stab in the dark at how long it's going to be till I'm sitting in the dark. Just take a guess. I don't even know if it's going to happen at all. Last time we were in this location, the lights went out like 10 minutes in and we just sat in the dark for the rest of the time. So just take a guess. Leave it down below. We've got Hayley Crowell on tonight. I've talked about Hayley on the stream many times while she wasn't here because I'm so impressed with this individual. I just want to share a little story of how I met Hayley. When I first moved to San Luis Obispo County, I was looking for reptile folks. I was looking for people who are into reptiles and found the Turtle Club that was having a meeting with Dr. Emily Taylor, who any of you have watched a lot of the vlog channels going back to the beginning of that channel. You've seen Dr. Emily. I would bring her gopher snakes that had been traumatized by, who knows, a car or a weed whacker, and she would proceed to take time out of her day to try and help that snake survive. And Hayley was one of her grad students who I really can't say enough good things about her without sounding like I'm kissing ass, but I'm not. She's just super cool. She loves reptiles, loves snakes, is into music, runs one of the last times I saw her, she was hosting the open mic at Dr. Emily's brewery. It's like, how much cooler can you possibly get? I don't know. But without any further gushing from myself, I'm going to now welcome our guest, Miss Hayley Crowell. Thank you for being here, Hayley. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many times people have given you intros before. How many times have you gotten intros from people before?
Oh, a weird, probably strange combination, but mostly open mics and mostly, a lot of sarcasm and not any as kind as what you just gave.
Well, I meant every word of it. I don't say things unless I mean them, or else I'm trying to be like fake mean to my friends. But, honestly, like, you are one of the more impressive people I've ever met in herpetology. Because of, I don't know what you've been into it for a while. I'm gonna pull some photos up right off the bat here. It's you with a Burmese python. That's obviously you. Look at your face. You're glowing. You look super happy to be around that snake.
Oh yeah, it never ended. I think like most of us who are into reptiles, our parents probably thought it was like a phase and like kind of humored us and maybe like gave us our first corn snake, but then like I never left it and my parents just finally accepted it. And I mean, it all starts with outreach, as you know, right? Like that's so important to like cultivating this love. So I think that was like one of the first like good moments captured of it.
Where was this?
That was at one of those very small hyper local zoos called Contocton Zoo in Thurmont, Maryland. And I grew up in Frederick, Maryland. So it was, it had goats and chickens and a couple big tortoises and maybe like, I don't know, a couple eyeball monkeys and some parrots and some Burmese pythons. I'm assuming that all came from people who did not want them, but it was close to our house, and so that's where we went on weekends, and we got to touch a lot of things and see a lot of cool critters, and it was great. It's accessible. I am very pro good zoo. I know there's some like debate behind zoos and SeaWorld type stuff, but I think ambassador animals are important and play a big role for a lot of us. So that's my own little soapbox for that.
Well, that's another reason that's another thing that impressed me about you, because you are very open to. I didn't know this as much as I do now, but there's kind of this divide between the hobbyist and breeding side of reptiles and the academic side. And right off the bat, and me personally, like I'm just kind of an idiot. Like compared to people who are academic, I did very poorly in school. I play myself down too much. I'm not stupid. I'm not dumb. I'm intelligent. But when it comes to academic stuff, when it comes to school, it just, I couldn't click with it. It didn't ever work for me. It never has. I'm good with doing stuff hands on. I'm good with going out and meeting people in person and doing things with people. But for some reason, school, just the whole whatever it is about school, it just, I failed at it. But you made me feel very comfortable in an academic setting, which is not something easy for people to do. And you did it for me. You made me feel comfortable that even though I'm not super strong in the academics, that was okay. And it didn't matter. The core was that we both really enjoy reptiles and we have a love for them. And that's all that really matters.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, I wouldn't, as weird as this sounds, wouldn't actually call myself an academic. Like, I graduated undergrad with a 2.9 GPA, which in theory wasn't what you need to like go into grad school. Most places have a 3.0 or above. I was not a great student. I got more than one D in undergrad, in college, believe it or not. And maybe that played into the 7 years I took off between undergrad and actually going back to school. So I took a kind of a winding path. And if anything, so I worked a little bit for government. I worked a little bit for academia. I feel like I've kind of been in all niches of it, but started like, you know, my parents were not academics, and they took me to like cultivate that love of reptiles, took me to things that they knew best. And one of the things they often took me to was reptile shows, because their mind like, where can we show her lots of reptiles? And so they took me to reptile shows. And while I still have a lot of mixed feelings, which I think people do generally, because there's like, I feel like for every awesome sect of people, there's like 3 or 4 loud or bad or kind of like known people who make the image for that group. And everyone outside of that just hears that image, and it's not necessarily reflective of everyone in it, like whether it's, you know, a breeder culture or government work or academia. But I grew up like going to reptile shows. And then I went to school to study reptiles, and then realized there was a whole bunch of other things you had to do in school, like chemistry and calculus. And I was terrible at all of those things and got so many terrible grades in them. But like herpetology and zoology stuck with me. But I didn't actually think academia was for me. So like every crazy, weird herp person who grows up in the Northeast, as soon as I graduated and turned 21, I like packed up my car with my dog and drove to South Florida to look for herps. Because if you want to go see crazy herps, you drive to Florida, right? And I didn't have much of a plan past that. So there's a lot of volunteer work and a lot of odd jobs before I actually found a job down there.
Well, let me, yeah, you're right. Florida, to me, the first time I went there, besides just having a layover, was, to go actually visit some of the reptile places. And I lived in Hawaii for a long time, as you know, and it just was like, this is Hawaii, but where you can keep reptiles. It's just, I was mind blown. I want to pull up this photo of you. It's a perfect transition, actually, because you got the picture of you with the berm as a kid, and then the picture of you actually working with a what is clearly an invasive Burmese python in the Everglades.
Yeah. So that was with USGS, and I saw that a couple weeks ago you had Bob Fisher on here. Bob Fisher, who is another USGS like awesome herp person, and I think that was a really big wake up call, because I had, aside from not being academic, I had parents who were very like anti-government, like very almost like borderline anarchist kind of, right? So there was like this kind of mistrust of academia, mistrust of government. But you know, I volunteered for them for a while because I wanted to work with big reptiles. And after volunteering for that particular lab, they created a position for me when I was about 23 or 24. I worked for them for about 5 years, and it was really an interesting and bizarre insight into what government work is and what research means on like a big level. And I think that's one place that initially, I hope people hear this and like hear out the whole story before they tune out. That was a place that like initially kind of cultivated this idea of the divide between like herp researchers and the keeper community, which you hinted about. And I think that also is a big product of just being South Florida. Like every problem we had all the money we had that went to was invasive herp control, and most, if not all of those, were a result of irresponsible pet keeping or pet trade or something related to that. So we saw a lot of issues surrounded by that, and in turn saw a lot of money and effort really poured into this problem that I think a lot of the people who were in it, at like my level, technicians, managers, um, even big project managers at that level, still did it because there's a love of reptiles. And the really big disconnect came at like the level of more so like Congress, the people who weren't directly involved in the science. And that's where I think the disconnect, if you really want to like sum it down to one issue, that's really where it all comes from both sides. These people who have no idea what it means to study these animals, have no love for these animals, and then they're the ones making the decision with the big money that we see on the news. And in turn, it just doesn't create a great scenario for everybody trickle down. So that was a really bizarre and strange experience. And while it was really fun going out to catch pythons and work on crocodiles, I worked in a large reptile spatial ecology lab. So we worked not just on invasive stuff, but we worked on native sea turtles and American crocodiles as well. Like that was great. But one of the big things that I think really drove me to go back to school after being out so long, like I went out back to grad school at 28 years old, and was the fact I wasn't learning anything anymore. Like I was a technician, I was hired, I had a job, I caught snakes, which like initially sounds really awesome, but that was it. Like I was learning nothing new. I didn't meet a whole lot of people. Like we didn't go to conferences. Like it was me, the 5 technicians I worked with, and like that was life. There's not a lot of room to move up. Permanent government jobs are basically someone has to retire or die before they become available. And yeah, I just wasn't learning anything. And it's a very stressful environment. All the tension and madness that is the South Florida herp world just trickles into all aspects of it. And there are some people who navigate that well, but they're actually kind of like set outside of it. Like University of Florida does a lot of awesome invasive herp research, but they're kind of removed up in Gainesville so they can, I think, navigate the madness a little better. But yeah, that desire to learn more and actually like better understand the critters I'm with and remove myself from that tension has really helped on all perspectives. And if I hadn't gone back to school, I wouldn't have met you all and kind of like jumped on board and pursued this like bridging of the worlds with you, which I love. I think it's so awesome, and I want to help push that more.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me too. We had a buddy that we lost last year, Forrest, who he's definitely more on the he was more on the, oh, there go the lights. I wonder who commented the right time. He was definitely more on the hobbyist and breeder side, but he was super into, like, he read all the books on herpetology. He knew all the herpetologists, all the old school, like the history of herpetology and all those people. He was one of those guys that I thought was also really going to help bridge that gap. And when we lost him, I was just crushed, just ultimately crushed. And to be honest, you're like the other person that gives me hope as much as he did for that. So I'm glad that you're still here with us, and I'm also glad you had us along today for myself for that tour of where you're at now. So you were in South Florida, and from there is when you came back to school under Dr. Emily Taylor at SLO. Yep. At the herpetology spot, and that's where you're there for a bit, where we met. And then from there you went to, where did you go? Did you go straight to, I know you're in Michigan now, but did you go straight to Michigan from? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I spent one summer in Tallahassee. I hid back in Florida for a little bit and then went north.
Gotcha. I don't think I blame you if you wanted to spend some more time in Florida. I would move to Florida if it wasn't for the whole, like, the family and everybody that lives here in California that's family, and we, the kids and grandparents, all that. I mean, Hawaii plus reptiles, yeah, let's go there. Caecilians, is that something you guys, I mean, okay, so guys, I went on this tour with Hayley. She allowed me into this spot where they're doing a virtual tour of the place she works now, and you guys are only beat out as far as all the different specimens, reptile and amphibian specimens you guys have, by the Smithsonian.
Yep, they're the only research collection that beats it out. We have about 450,000 individual amphibian and reptile specimens, so slightly less than like 500,000 specimens from all over the globe, from about 200 years worth of collecting. So we are the biggest research collection aside from the Smithsonian on the planet. So if there's something that you ever wondered existed, might exist, any iterations, different variation, morphs of that, like we probably have a specimen, and we probably have a really good time series of those specimens going back to 18 and early 1900s when Helen Gage was collecting them in Central America.
Yeah, there was some stuff that it reminded me of, like, if it was a library of specimens. It was like it was huge. It was like if you're going through this huge library with books, but instead of books, it's actual jars with the animals that you can look at and check them out. And it was insane. I'm gonna put a couple pictures up here of just some wet specimens, just so I can give people an idea of kind of what I was seeing on the stream. It's super cool I can't wait to come there in person and like be able to get up close and personal with some of those jars. Because when you guys were pulling by some of the jars, I was just like, all I wanted to do is be able to like reach out and like look at them. And I mean, you guys had that one lizard that there's at this point only one lizard for the entire species. Like that's the only one known. And you guys have it there. It's freaking sweet. Yeah. And the Sicilians are something that took me way back to like just childhood, looking at life books and seeing these things. And a Sicilian, for anybody that doesn't know what a Sicilian is, it's basically if snakes were amphibians. I mean, is that fair?
I think that is a very good description. Or think Tremors, but smaller. They are literally the animals that inspired Tremors. I'm not kidding you. Like the Tremors monsters were based off of like Dermophis Sicilians from Mexico.
They're awesome creatures, and just their name, and I don't know anything about them other than like I know they're in like South America, Central America, Africa. Like we don't have them up here in North America. Is that right?
We don't have them in the United States. So there are species that are in Mexico and further south, but they're kind of equatorial in distribution. So filler background for those of you who are like Sicilian, I think I've heard of that besides like Italian people. There are three like main groups of amphibians, right? Salamanders, frogs, and then Sicilians are this other totally bizarre species group that nobody thinks of. And there's hundreds of species of them, and they can range from like really itty bitty couple inches to there are ones that actually grow more than a meter long and get like this big around.
That's insane.
Yeah, if you ever want to go on an adventure ride, you just Google Sicilian teeth, and they look like little sharks. People call them sharks of the land or of the soil because of how crazy they are. I could spend hours just talking about all the weird things Sicilians do. But my favorite highlight, one of the things, and if you've ever watched Life in Cold Blood with David Attenborough, you might already know this, but the coolest and weirdest thing about Sicilians is the mothers take care of, a lot of them have parental care. So they take care of their young. Some are born in eggs, some actually give live birth, which is like totally weird thinking about amphibians, but they give live birth, some of them. And actually to provision their young and take care of them, where mammals would have milk, mother Sicilians actually grow an extra layer of skin, and the babies use those really scary, giant, sharp shark teeth and eat her first layer of skin off of her. And she keeps regrowing it, and she feeds them with her skin, and then she grows more and they eat it until it is time to leave Sicilian home. And it's called dermophagy, so like dermis, skin, and phagy, eat. So that's a crazy and weird and kind of awesome thing that this group of animals do.
Wow, that's nuts, dude. Hey, you shared this picture. I'll pull this one up too. Shout out to Nat Geo for this shot. I had all the time that I thought Sicilians were cool, I never had seen a shot like this. That looks like something out of, I mean, it looks like Alien. It looks like the alien that pops out of the chest of John Candy on Spaceballs. Like when he falls on the, I'm pretty sure it was John Candy. I'm pretty sure it was his character that, maybe it was somebody else in the bar in Spaceballs that falls on the table and the thing pops out and starts singing, "Hello, my darling. Hello, my baby."
Yeah.
That's what the thing looks like.
Man, it's been a hot minute since I watched that.
That movie is near and dear to my heart because it was the first time my dad let me stay up past my bedtime was to watch Spaceballs. He was like, Oh, you know what? Yeah, you can stay up and watch this.
That is fantastic.
Oh, look
Oh
at that
man.
thing. That's a not only is that crazy a crazy shot, but just like photography wise, like the lighting and the way that they've come in from the side with the backlight and you get all this I'll call it saliva coming off the teeth. Wow.
Yeah. So there's actually recently, so that's actually what almost like all Sicilian mouths look like. Even like the itty bitty ones all have these like crazy big teeth. And some of them, I don't remember if you can tell in that picture very well, but some of them actually have a second row of teeth inside their first row of teeth. And very recently, it's somewhat controversial. There's still some research to be done to it, but a paper just came out suggesting that they actually produce venom because someone did some kind of CT scans and dissections of the upper lip of them and found like there's tons of these oral glands associated with all the teeth. And initially, people were like, oh, it might just be saliva, but through studying some of the enzyme activity in it, it actually suggests that these guys might also be creating venom. So like if they weren't weird enough, these little psycho crazy worm amphibians are creating venom, which is crazy because a lot of them already have poison glands on their tails or their back end. They secrete poison already. So like, what are Sicilians? If you ever want to go down like a wormhole or a Sicilian hole and like just learn about some new crazy group of animals, like look up Sicilians.
Yeah, and this photo is such a great juxtaposition compared to the previous ones I've shown, like with mom with her babies. It's all cute. They look so cute and cuddly, and then
Yeah.
nuts, man. That's so cool. Speaking of Sicilian, there was one thing when I was thinking about Sicilians and putting these pictures together for the stream. It reminded me of something else that I had looked at when I was a kid, which were Amphiuma, or also known as a Congo eel. I mean, I'm assuming there's somewhat related. I mean, they're both amphibians, yeah?
Yeah, they're both amphibians. They're distantly related. Amphiumas are actually a type of salamander. They're in their own family of salamander. And there's just 3 species here of them here in the U.S. So 2-toed, 1-toed, 3-toed. So if you live in the Southeast, you may have seen these, but they're just salamanders. So literally just salamanders. They're a little weird because they have lateral lines like fish. So they can sense like vibration and things in the water, but they're salamanders.
Just like a slender salamander on steroids.
Yeah, effectively. Have you seen some of them get like 3 feet long, 3 or 4 feet? They can get huge, and they got a bite on them. Those things are like mowing down on crayfish and small like vertebrates. They bite hard. If you've never seen anyone get bit by them, it's not pretty.
Yeah, on that tour today when he pulled out the giant salamander, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I've seen them, but I've never seen somebody on a video even pick one out, even though it's a specimen and not a live. It was just to see it held in human hands and like how big it was, and then that huge frog he pulled out too. Man, I can't wait to come to that place. It's gonna be. I mean, virtual tours are such a far cry from being somewhere in person, but even the virtual tour was super cool. Just like when he pulled out that giant frog, that Goliath frog, the way it was sitting, it looked like a human, just like with the way the legs were bent. And it looked like almost the thinking man, just not thinking as much as sitting.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the things we actually have a whole cabinet and room just for extinct species. So things that people collected, like certain crown giant anoles that were collected in the early 20th century that are extinct now. We have specimens from them, and passenger pigeons and some of these older things. So it's a really amazing collection, right? You just saw the herp collection, but we also have mammals and birds and a whole herbarium. Almost half that building is for plants.
Dude, yeah, that was a trip.
Also crazy.
Yeah, before he got to the rooms where the labs and stuff, when he just walked through the hallways getting there, it was such a trip because it seemed like it was like a Austin Powers style underground lab hallway to leading places, but it looked like a hunter from, the hunter room from Ace Ventura. This is a lovely room of death. Just like all the mammals on the wall. Yeah, that was my mind was like, what is happening right now? Where are we going?
Oh yeah, it's effectively like the high-tech Costco of dead plants and animals.
That's a perfect way to put it. I used way too many words just now. Yeah, that was perfect. The high-tech Costco of dead plants and animals. That was good. Well done.
Yeah.
Freaking fantastic. So I feel like I had another picture in here I wanted to pull up before. Oh, your main focus of work has been, we didn't even talk about this. Rattlesnakes has been the main. That was I even forgot to mention that in the intro, was the event that I went to with the Turtle Club. Was you guys and Dr. Emily brought rattlesnakes. I was like, oh yeah, that was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, they have rattlesnakes? Yeah, I'm going. And that's like your main work is with rattlesnakes.
Yeah, so I came into rattlesnakes for my master's. I worked on a lot of reptiles, but I was almost exclusively a python, big constrictor person. And while I did do some like native snake surveys in South Florida, my interaction with vipers went about as far as like diamondbacks and cottonmouths or rosy rays are like scooching them off the road, and a little bit of outreach. But the biology, believe it or not, for pythons and constrictors and rattlesnakes are actually pretty similar in a lot of ways. Like I study physiology, so not so much like predator-prey interactions or like really small cellular stuff, but the way that the body like interacts with the environment. So I worked on like energy budgets and thermal regulation were my kind of big science with Emily. And rattlesnakes, if you're familiar or ever seen one, they sit in a little ball and wait for food to walk by them. And what do pythons and big constrictors do in the wild? They sit in a little ball and wait for food to come by, because they're all sit and wait predators. So from a physiology standpoint, they're actually fairly similar. They both use heat sensing pits, as one of their main ways to interact with the world. So like one is venom, it's small and buzzes its tail, and the other one's like giant and squeezes things to death. But other than behavior wise, they actually are really similar in a lot of ways. So I really found rattlesnakes to be an easy transition from working with pythons. And being in California, it was great because they were everywhere. So the sample size was really easy for that. And like I think most other herp people, I already loved them, and then I fell in love with them more working with them because they are just so cool and unique and charismatic. And anyone who has worked with venomous snakes, not elapids, but I feel like rattlesnakes, a lot of them are significantly less exciting than I think they actually make them out to be on TV. Like you watch some of these crazy shows and you see like rattlesnakes up in these big angry ass positions and like buzzing and crazy and striking. But the reality is if you like go buy one on trail, it probably looks at you and like slithers away. Or like, you pick up some tongs and like chuck it aside and it's like, oh, bummer, I guess I moved. And so they're fun and uniquely charming. But here actually in Michigan, I've kind of switched I don't want to say switch because I still love vipers, but I've kind of switched my focus out of a species-centric view to more of a subject view. So I will incorporate rattlesnakes, but here I'm actually studying color evolution in physiology. So we're working a lot with mimicry complexes because our lab travels to South America a lot to do collections. You might have heard them say in the tour a lot. You go to Peru and Belize and Guatemala and Nicaragua and collect a lot of these species. And we're really, Allison, my advisor here, Allison Davis-Roboski, her main work is looking at coral snakes and coral snake mimics and how color evolves within snakes. So I'm very interested in that. I'm also very interested in the thermal benefits of color and how that interplays with other physiological factors. So really like dark coloration, how do snakes with darker coloration actually survive better than conspecifics who have lighter color in species that have multiple color morphs? And it's proven really, really awesome. And I think this is one of the ways I would really like to work more and interact more with the kind of breeder hobbyist community. When I came out to the Reptarium a little ways back, I had a lot of great conversations, but I had a good conversation with I think Garrett from Reach Out.
Garrett, yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about snakes with black heads, and I'm very interested in snakes with black heads from a wild point, like Tantilla or black-headed pythons, just from a physiology point, you know, they have darker colored heads. In theory, like their brains might be able to heat faster. This could be a really adaptive trait. If you live underground, right, you want to stick your head out, heat up brain functions, heat up the rest of your body and go about your business. So I'm really interested in it from an adaptation standpoint. But he and I started talking about breeding snakes and targeting animals that have a certain look or dark heads, and how there's some downstream effects of that breeders see, whether it's neurologic issues or other things. And that's when it hit me more than it kind of already has. I'm like, man, like we have all this talk about getting snakes and breeding them, setting up this facility at UMich, but it's like, but these folks and people are already doing it. They're like doing science all the time, and they have these giant collections, and they see things and know these animals so well because they're around them all the time. Like, why can there be a synergistic effect here? Like, I know that, you know, folks are interested in color on both sides of this and how to like learn more about it, what makes it more awesome. I really want to like harness the power of like academic research and herp hobbyists and try to come up with some really cool color science together. So it was really, really awesome. And I'm hoping in the next 3 or 4 years while I'm here to really reach out to some folks and collaborate with some hobbyists in the area and some breeders.
I could shed a tear. Garrett is one of my favorite people on the planet, and watching you two, and I knew that you guys have a great conversation because just how Garrett is and how smart you are. And when I saw that, I was just like, I left. I was like, all right, I'm gonna let you guys talk because I know this is gonna be good. And then the fact that you threw color science into it to tap into my little side of photography and videography is just like all of my worlds coming together. And that's yeah, it was great. No, I'm literally about to shed a tear. It's ridiculous.
Reach out.
It's like I can't wait till we're not doing these goddamn things over Zoom anymore. But it's in the meantime, I'm trying to take advantage of it as much as possible to be able to do them with people that, even though we don't happen to live close anymore. You know, I'd like to have some more folks from maybe countries that I'm not able to go to or maybe can never go to and do them that way. You know, using this Zoom and online feature. But colors and rattlesnakes, I did have a picture that you sent. Speaking of color and rattlesnakes, which if I can find my photos through here, it was something you guys were painting the rattles, and then I also have a photo up here that I was pulling up earlier when you were talking about rattlesnakes and reach out. You're sitting here. You're at the you're in downtown Slow at the Mission.
Yeah.
And little kids, and you got a rattlesnake tubed, just doing a full badass move. Like, yeah, no big deal. We're just sitting here at downtown Slow in the Mission with rattlesnakes. You want to pet it? That's so cool.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, that was a weird experience. It's really fun. I love outreach with every fiber of my being. I feel like I'm stuck in a constant war of whether I want to do like research for a living or just go into like teaching at a small university or biological station or something, because I'm just so excited. And anyone who's like given somebody a snake who was initially like and then like you see that light bulb moment go off where the curiosity overcomes the fear and you create this connection and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool, or like it's not slimy, and you're like, yeah, isn't this awesome? Like those are the greatest, like most instant gratification moments of all that we do. Like the science is awesome, and you know, you breed something that's really beautiful and cool, like that's awesome for a niche group of people. But if the rest of the world doesn't like care about these animals and kind of like what we're doing doesn't really matter, right? Like so it's really awesome to get that. But that was a particularly weird experience because it was the Slow Wildlife Festival. I'm not sure if you've been, but like the Raptor Rescue goes, some of the other kind of local nature conservancy groups go, and they'll bring like a bird or something. And we were all going to set up a stand and just bring like some scaloperists to talk about reptiles. And they're like, oh, you bring in live animals? And I was like, oh, we're going to bring some small lizards and put them on the stand. Like, oh, you guys do snakes too, right? I was like, yeah, we have some gopher snakes. And I'm like, yeah, but your love stays rattlesnakes. I'm like, yeah, but like we're setting up camp in the middle of downtown Slow, right? Like, I don't think I want to deal with those permits to just like have tons of venomous snakes out on the sidewalk with pedestrians. They're like, oh, it's fine. You don't need to do anything. You can bring them. I was like, you're telling me that like I could just dump a bunch of rattlesnakes in the Mission in Slow with like a bunch of kids around, and you're just assume that I got it under control. I mean, it's that was great from a logistics standpoint, but it's like of all the weird things cities do for permits and like people building railings on decks, like apparently the rattlesnakes were not a concern. So
Bring your
that was
kids.
especially fun. Yeah, it's like, all right. I mean, it was fun. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they put the faith in the right person. I mean, you guys, your crew there, that whole crew, the Pearl Lab, some solid individuals who I would definitely trust with my kids around rattlesnakes. But luckily, I guess they had the right instincts. Like, yeah, these folks can bring rattlesnakes around the public. It's no big deal, which is great. And that was the other thing when we were mentioning like how rattlesnake acts if somebody sees it on a trail. I remember when we were out there making that video, which the link for that video, guys, is in the description. When I went out with Hayley and her crew to go find the rattlesnakes they had been tracking at Montaña de Oro at the state park, you were letting one go. And remember, there was that group of ladies that was just on their morning walk, and you got to kind of show. They were kind of like, "What is happening here?" And you were like, "Yeah, see, the rattlesnake doesn't want. It's just gonna go on its way. Not a big, dangerous, scary creature." And anyway, I could say it's just another one of the cool points for you. You won a lot of them. You won more. I think I typed this in the description. You are the coolest person I've ever met through reptiles. Period.
Whoa.
So congratulations. It's not a compliment I hand out ever.
I will take that.
Yeah, you take it. You run with it. You do color work and get academics together with hobbyist breeders and continue along your path of work, sister, because in my opinion, it's some of the best work on the planet at this point for my own personal little corner of the world.
If it means, anything too, I think that gap between like academics and like hobbyists and breeders stuff, I think that is also kind of closing with like the generational changing of the guards too, right? I think we get a lot more non-traditional students in academia than there previously was. There's a lot of, especially really awesome herpetologists who, came from hobbyist world and have kind of made the crossover, like Raul Diaz in Southern California, amazing, but does like keeps really awesome retics and chameleons, but also does really incredible evolutionary like biology. Tim Colston in Florida, Mississippi, kind of former into a hobbyist person, but now does really cool microbiome work in frogs. Like these people keep the doors open. And I think that the younger generation moving in is a lot more open to these kind of cross collaborations. Plus the advent of like social media really helps these things more than some of the like stuffy kind of cliche higher up academics or old school like government officials you think of. So I think there's a lot of hope and bright futures, especially when we have professors like Emily Taylor and Allison Davis-Roboski who really want to foster and are really on board with this and are just at the baseline embracing the facts that we're all here because we love herps, right? So I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, me too now too. So great, fantastic. Let me here before we move over to the after party for the Q&A. Anybody in the chat that has questions? I know I do this every time. I steal our guest until the end of time, but I always leave a few minutes at the end. So if you guys have questions in the chat that you can ask them, then I will ask them to our guest for you. So now's the time if you have some questions before we go to our after chat. And thank you, Mr. Sexton and Bradley, for that as well. Now's the time, folks. Yeah, I can't wait to come back out and check out that place in person and hang out and do some video. I'm gonna bring a gimbal and do some get some nice macro shots of some of those specimens. They look like what a cool place.
It's very overwhelming. It's just the first time I've been in a big collections kind of museum to work. I actually worked in a really tiny one in undergrad. I went to Shippensburg State University in Pennsylvania, which is like a 6,000 student person. So the reptile show that my parents always took me to was the Allentown Reptile Show, which was, crazy enough its own right. But that building, it's so inspiring just to have like the original notes from the first woman like herpers who went to Panama in like 1901 and like are describing what like a red-eyed tree frog. Like, it's so cool and inspiring. And there's specimens like in the museum, and you just all the time. And like I walk the aisles, and every time I walk down, I know vipers very well. I'll walk down the aisles with vipers, and I see like 6 new things I've never heard of, or some old name for something that it was called in like 1879, and it's on the collection tags, and it's so cool and really, it's like a time warp you're surrounded by. It's really, really neat. And
how did you end up there? Oh, sorry, I'm gonna start getting some questions from the chat while these people are here. J Baby's Reptiles is asking where do you do your field work? I mean, I know you've been all over the place, but
yeah. So previously, I worked a lot in Florida when I was with USGS and throughout the Southeast. And then in California, my work was strictly on the Central Coast. But now our lab, the Davis Roboski lab here at University of Michigan, we do most of our work in Central and South America. We do a lot of work in Panama, a lot of work in Peru. And actually, I still am doing a little bit of kind of local American work this summer. I'm actually going out to Colorado to do a little work on Crotalus viridis, kind of the western side of the state. But our work really focuses on the neotropics. And every few years, we actually do collections and research trips to Australia, because we actually have a lab member who's stationed in Australia and works on death adders. So we also go down there every couple of years to do collections as well.
What side of the continent do you guys go to usually?
It changes, because we try to get different spots for like different collections to kind of work on the museum. So our collaborator right now is in Adelaide. So I suspect our next trip will probably be in the south side of the country, but who actually knows what permit will come through and when we'll go. The world's in a little bit of a mystery state as far as international field work goes right now.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if I told you this or not, but we were in Australia. We literally flew back. We landed in the States the night that they voted to make it a national emergency in Congress. So we got back from Australia. We could have potentially been stuck in Australia, which would have been okay in some aspects, but not so okay in others. But yeah, that was my first time there going on a herp trip with my buddy Dave, who is somebody you'll definitely have to meet in the future. And there was another question here. This is a good question from Michelle at Moshballs. What herpetology books do you recommend?
Oh gosh. So if you want to get real like scientific heavy, like the OG herpetology textbook that we give students is by Harvey Poe. And that has a couple new editions every year, but you can buy used ones really cheap if you don't buy like the most like recent edition. So that's like if you want to get detail, like what we used for the upper level college students. If you want just actual kind of good information, like heavier than your normal kind of like book you get with like, oh, cobras are venomous, they have hoods. You want something a little more in depth, I actually highly recommend, I will grab it up here off my bookshelf. This book is absolutely incredible. It is by Harvey Lillywhite, and he's a professor at the University of Florida who did all of his work on sea snakes, and he's another physiologist, but it's a little heavier than kind of everyday reading. So really good information on basically everything about snake physiology. Like there's a whole chapter on like eating physiology and color evolution and behavior and like how scales work. It's a really, really cool book. There's a big chapter on senses. So I definitely recommend that one. It's hard for me to snakes. I don't venture outside of snakes for my reading very much. So the only other one for just kind of fun, interesting reading, there are two actually that I absolutely push if you want like not heavy facts, but just like good stories. Nonfiction, Inner Fish, Neil Shubin, super awesome. This guy's an evolution professor at the University of Chicago. But this book is just literally about all of our inner reptile and how human senses evolve. and how they relate back to like ancient dinosaur and amphibian senses and all the connections we have to ancient herps. So it's really, really awesome. And then some of you might be familiar with Harry Green, as he is the Lord of Snake Research. He wrote the book Tracks and Shadows, which is absolutely awesome. It's just about the life living field biology and writing and kind of science in the early days. So all of those are really awesome books.
And you have them right there to hold up and show the covers. That true professional.
Yeah, I read snake books and like weird fantasy series, and that's about it.
Well, I think you're gonna fit in just fine in our after party here in the Zoom meeting. So, yeah, well done. Hayley, is there anything? There's so much further we could go. There have definitely been some comments in the chat. Our buddy Lance saying we need to put Brian in a time warp so we can get more interview time in our 1 hour. And yeah, I get it. Trust me, I would be fine with the exception of how unbelievably busy I am all the time. I would be willing to just sit down and talk endlessly on these things, with the exception that I also don't really like to talk to people over the internet. I prefer to talk to people in person. So that's another, on the top of the fact that I'm very busy and the fact that it's the combo of the fact that I'm busy with the fact that I like talking to people over a computer. We keep it to an hour. That's what we do. I'm sorry.
Understood.
But we'll certainly bring Hayley back for more interviews, or just going to check out her spot and just what she's up to and all the awesome stuff she's doing with reptiles and the world of reptiles. And Hayley, if there's anything you'd like to say to anybody before we sign off for the live stream, now's a good time to say it.
I just want to say thanks for having me on. I love chatting about this. I have so many little mini soapboxes. I'm so happy to share my little herp world. If anyone is ever in Michigan proper and wants to go out looking for Massasaugas or a unisexual salamanders or all any weird things here, hit me up. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter. Also, if you ever just want to talk about cool color things you see in the reptiles you keep, I am always super amped to talk about color, especially in snakes. So anytime you want to chat about that, let me know. I'm always looking for new cool things to chat about.
Awesome. Perfect, Hayley. All right, I'll see you in just a couple minutes in the Q&A afterwards, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, sis. And there it is again, my false intro, outro. I promise my cousin is coming next week, and we're not going to have that ever happen again. He's going to be working the controls. I'll be able to forget about the fact that I have a computer in front of me and just be able to talk. He's coming next week, and then from then on, we'll have my cousin running the controls so I can forget about these controls in front of my face right here. But I think that most of you would agree that Hayley was possibly the most perfect guest to have on this channel. Her affinity for snakes, the passion that she obviously has for them, the work with color stuff and the way it intertwines everything. I mean, anybody who has anything to say otherwise, say it. I dare you. I dare you. Like, how was she not the perfect person to have on? Hayley Crowell, I tagged her earlier today on Instagram, so you can find her there and follow her there. There's also the video that we did with the rattlesnake work, so you can see again how awesome she is. I feel like I'm a broken record, so I'm gonna stop saying it, but it's just true. See you guys later.